Well, good morning, and thank you all for coming again for our media partners for their records. I'm Hernando County Sheriff Al Nienhuis. It is spelled Nienhuis, and it is pronounced Nienhuis. First of all, I want to lay a little bit of groundwork when it comes to the jail, and you can see a still picture here. We're going to show you a couple angles from a video. This is the sum total of our the male side of our medical unit. You can see that it's relatively small. Even though it has double bunks, we obviously can't use the top bunks because it is a medical area, so it is very small, and that's part of the reason why that the county has decided to do a study and a master plan to increase the size of the medical unit to give us more bed space for those inmates that have some sort of medical condition, whether it's moderate or serious, and also give us more single cells and be able to segregate people a little bit easier if necessary, and last and certainly not least, to give us some more room for some mental health facilities, because as you might imagine, and I know you all are well aware that jails have a significant amount of individuals with both mental health issues as well as physical issues. So we start off back in January of this past year, on January 4th, when Jory Lynn Van Antwerp was booked into the Hernando County Detention Center, and he is actually going to be our deceased, our victim in this case. And he was receiving medical treatments prior to his arrest in January for an illness that was very, very serious. He was actually getting outpatient care down at a large hospital down in the Tampa area, and he obviously continued receiving those outpatient treatments after he was booked in the Hernando County Jail, and we had to take him down there for some time. Back in April 23rd, he was assigned full-time to the medical housing unit because of his illness. And our suspect in this case, William Harrison Gillespie, he was booked in to the Hernando County Detention Center just earlier this month on June 4th of 2024. And he was arrested for battery prior conviction, so it was a felony in this case, and he was arrested for 2 counts on those. On 6/9, Gillespie was involved in a fight in general housing with a cellmate, and he was moved to what we call disciplinary lockdown because of his interaction, which resulted in a fight. And I think it's important that there was some interaction. He could not get along with the individual he had the fight with, and we believe he was the aggressor in that first fight. Then on the very next day, in disciplinary lockdown, which consists of one cellmate rather than a whole housing unit of cellmates, he again, based on his interaction, was not able to get along with that person, and he got in another fight with that individual. Now, in this second fight, in this disciplinary lockdown, apparently the other, even though we believe he was the aggressor in that fight, the other individual got the best of him, and he was actually injured to the point where he was transported to a local hospital for a very short period of time and brought back. He was placed in the medical unit because of those not very serious, but those injuries he needed to recuperate from. And so he was placed in the medical unit on administrative segregation by our classification unit because of those 2 previous interactions which resulted in fights. Now, as you might imagine, with 650 inmates, classification has a full-time job trying to keep inmates that are not compatible separated from each other, and they really do a great job. It's amazing to me we don't have more interactions that result in fights. But he was housed, our suspect was housed in cell 105 in the medical unit. On 6/14, just a few days ago, he was called out of that cell by Sergeant Cruz. And the reason for him being called out of that is he was going to interview him on those previous 2 fights to determine if charges would be filed. As he exited his cell, and I'm going to show you the video in a minute, but I want to make sure you lay the groundwork so you're looking for some of this stuff. As he exited his cell, our suspect, Gillespie, actually kicked our victim, who, if you look at the pictures here, it's going to be the blue bunk on the left side as far away as you can get. We're looking at a pretty far away angle here, and we're going to look at it at a couple angles. But he's laying there, not interacting with our suspect at all, being very complacent and compliant, not really responding. And our suspect comes out of a jail cell. Off to the left there, you can see actually Detention Deputy Russell standing off to the far left there. That's the cell he's going to come out of. And he exited his cell and he kicked our victim at least a couple times in the head. Sergeant Cruz immediately stepped in and grabbed our suspect and took him out of the medical unit and secured him with Deputy Russell. Within a couple minutes, they came back and checked on our victim, and he seemed to be okay. He didn't have any obvious bruising. He was reacting normally. He was talking with the deputy, but in an abundance of caution, they requested the medical staff, and you'll see this too. After another 2 or 3 minutes, I think it was about 4 minutes total after the attack, several members of our medical unit, three of them, I guess, a CNA, an LPN, and an RN, all responded to check on our victim, Mr. Van Antwerp. He was reacting perfectly normal. You can see them checking his vitals. Everything was fine. He refused medical treatment. There wasn't any obvious injuries on him. And throughout the rest of that day, and this all occurred around 10 o'clock in the morning, throughout the rest of that day and into the night, he was acting perfectly normal. And it's also important to note that we talked to all the other cellmates there, and they verified all this, that he didn't antagonize the suspect at all, they didn't interact at all, and it was totally unprovoked, and that he was acting, our victim was acting normal until later that night. Later that night and into the early morning hours, our suspect began to show some of symptoms, and we weren't sure if they were related to his serious illness or if it was something else, maybe this battery that occurred. And so early in the morning, we actually transported our victim to the hospital. The hospital, and by the way, our suspect was charged with battery on a person detained in a prison or jail, so charges were filed against them. And again, around that afternoon, he was out of he went to the restroom, ate his dinner. Our victim was moving around. Even though he needed a wheelchair, he was moving around on his own, sitting up, acting, by all accounts, the way he was prior to the battery. Once he made it to the hospital, our victim, they did a CT scan and found out that he had a brain bleed. Because it was unrelated, or we believe the brain bleed was unrelated, and maybe the reason he was declining was not related to his original medical condition, which was obviously a possibility, detectives from my major case unit responded, as well as forensics, to document the scene and determine what happened. Actually, later that afternoon, so this is about a day and a half after the initial battery, he started declining very rapidly and passed away at 8:02 p.m. the following day after the original battery. The medical examiner took custody of the victim's body, and the medical examiner did determine that the cause of death was the brain bleed and was not his original medical condition. And so for that reason, our suspect was charged with second-degree murder. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you the video. Oh, it's here. There it is. All right. And now we're going to show you a fairly brief video from this angle, and then we're going to show you an uncut video from the other angle. Now, we did speed it up a little bit for the interest of time, but it's not cut. It's only sped up when there's not when there's a little bit of a delay. So we can see the deputy there off to the left. She knows that the sergeant is coming to talk to this individual. And she unlocks the door, tells him to get dressed. You'll see in the other video from the other angle that he has some shorts or underwear on, and he's actually putting his prison uniform, or jail uniform rather, on and getting ready. And you can see the Deputy Russell is interacting with Sergeant Cruz there at the door a little bit, calling for her, and they're doing some housekeeping things, getting ready for her to interview, meaning Sergeant Cruz to interview our suspect in the previous batteries that he had done in other areas of the jail. Again, he's getting ready, and he's getting ready to come out of the cell. They did unlock it, say, come on out. And she was going to, I assume Sergeant Cruz was going to take him out to a room outside of medical to talk to him about these previous batteries. Now you can see him come out. He's looking for her, and all of a sudden he just starts kicking our victim. She gets him under control, takes him actually out of the medical unit, and within about a minute or 2 minutes, she comes back to check on our victim, again, who doesn't have any obvious bruising or anything. Now here's another angle. You can see off to the right there, cell number 105, Deputy Russell unlocking the door, telling him, Sergeant Cruz wants to talk to you, go ahead and get ready, get dressed. He's getting some pants and a shirt on. You can see our victim is, he's not, obviously has a serious medical condition, but he obviously can move around. He's not bedridden. Now, it's also important to note that even though our suspect had been involved in a couple batteries, he was not classified as what we call a red dot. He was not to the point, because of his other interactions were fights. Even though he was an aggressor, there was some mutual combat there. Now, we had about a 50-second delay. You can see our victim rather, is laying there. It took about 50 seconds to secure our suspect, come back in. Sergeant Cruz talks to him. He doesn't have any complaints. He's basically telling her in so many words that, I'm fine. But again, in the abundance of caution, you'll see we'll fast forward again and get our 3 nurses, or 3 medical personnel rather, in there to check on him. I believe this next, we fast forward, it's a total of about 2 minutes and 22 seconds between the time at that point there and medical staff come in. I believe I was told they were doing med pass at this time, so they were dealing with other inmates, giving them their medicine and stuff throughout the jail. Here's Sergeant Cruz coming back in to assist the medical team in examining him, checking on him again, asking him how he's doing, anything, if he has any issues. The victim had also told us that he had never talked with, see, he's sitting up there, they bring him around, he gets checked out. Our victim said he had never spoken with the suspect, but the suspect claimed when asked why he did that, the victim was, now you can see there's a picture around this same time after the attack took place. You can see there's no obvious injuries to our victim there. And I will tell you that post-mortem, I did see a picture post-mortem, and he did have a little bit of a bruise on his cheek, but it was not very pronounced. It maybe looked like he'd been slapped or something to that effect. Now, we believe that the brain bleed was due to maybe a kick that occurred around his hair, so that wasn't as visible, and apparently there was somewhat of a bruise there, but again, not very obvious. And we don't know if if it would have, it had been a day and a half, so it was a while, but you can see there again, they're asking him if he's okay, if he needs to go to the hospital or anything, and he's saying that he does not. He was refusing any additional medical treatments. Again, for information, the three individuals there, there's a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, a LPN, and an RN are all there observing him and making sure that they didn't believe anything was imminent. So, and again, this is about 10 o'clock in the morning for perspective, and it wasn't until late into that night and early in the morning that he was had anything unusual. And again, we weren't even sure if it was related to his serious medical condition or if it was actually because of the battery. So, but the medical examiner is the only one. I know sometimes we're asked about murder charges and the like. If it's not obvious the cause of death, like a gunshot that's obviously fatal, we oftentimes will wait for the medical examiner to give us a cause and manner of death to ensure that we actually have a murder and the person did not have a heart attack or some other thing, and find out that the altercation did not result in a life-threatening injury. So with that being said, I think that's pretty much the timeline of it. Does anybody have any questions I could answer?
Sheriff, what's the underlying health issue?
I really don't want to go into details on that, but I would just say it was a very serious health-related issue.
Was it a terminal? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, like, why did it look like maybe that could have been the cause?
Well, and again, anytime you have a serious illness, or if somebody is not in good health, and they deteriorate quickly and end up dying, it doesn't necessarily mean it is related to a criminal act, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's related to a serious medical condition. But I would tell you that it was very serious, and I guess you could even say that it was probably eventually going to be terminal. But yeah, the medical examiner was very adamant that the brain bleed is what caused his death, and that was caused because of the battery that occurred. So.
You sort of touched on this already, but any indication why he attacked the victim?
Well, and again, we're trying to figure that out. He claimed that our victim was talking expletive during the night, but when we interviewed the other inmates that were in there, they said they didn't interact at all. The victim was quiet. There was no interaction whatsoever. It was totally unexpected and unprovoked. You can see if you look at some of the other inmates in there, they're going like, what just happened? And again, prior to that, even our indication, and our suspect does have a little bit of a criminal history. He has 11 total felonies, 5 of which resulted in convictions, but none of those 11 felony were violent up until what he was in jail for now. So apparently he was digressing a little bit. He also had 13 misdemeanors. 1 or more of those may have been battery, but obviously they weren't serious batteries, or they would have been felonies. And 13 of them, 4 of them resulted in convictions. And even his interactions, they were after some sort of verbal interaction that turned physical. We didn't have any indication that he just unprovoked started attacking people, and that's why it was a surprise to us as well as the other inmates that were in there. So I don't know if we'll ever know why he did it, because yeah, we don't have any indication he knew the person, knew the charges, knew anything about our victim, didn't have any previous relationship with him or anything. So, all right.
Thank you so much for having us here. Can you explain what our victim's charges were?
Well, he was actually charged with sexual assault by a custodian, and the victim was over 12 and under 18, and there were 6 counts of that. Other than that, he did not have much of a criminal history, if at all. So.
It's a dangerous place. Prison's often a dangerous place for someone who's involved with a crime against a child. Do you think that was a contributor?
No, and that's why I was saying none of the inmates that were in the medical unit when they were questioned had any idea of the victim's charges, and if they didn't know and they had much more interaction with him than our suspect, we are relatively confident that our suspect again didn't know this person, didn't know the charges, had no idea why our victim was in jail, much less the specific charges. So I guess it's always a possibility, but we're about as confident as we can be that he had no idea it was I guess a crime of opportunity. He happened to be the closest person to him when he exited his cell, and just just snapped, I guess.
Sure. This is unrelated to this. Are you able to give any update on the domestic shooting on Stillwater?
I thought you might ask that, so I got a briefing this morning. Again, a totally separate issue. I want to make sure it's clear that it has nothing to do with this issue, but I was asked what we believe, and again, it is extremely preliminary because even at the start of business today, it was still very unclear exactly what happened. But what my detectives in Major Case have been able to piece together so far is that these were 2 brothers. One brother, our victim, or the person who was shot, who we believe is a victim. Again, we still need to sort some things out, but the person who received the gunshots had only been down here from out of state since Saturday, was planning on leaving again today, informed his brother apparently that he was leaving, and this caused the shooter in this case to become enraged, and they started a physical altercation. There was another individual in the house that tried to break it up and actually got injured, and both our shooter and this other person ended up on the floor, and because of that, our shooter pulled a gun and shot more than once at his brother. His brother is in a local hospital, and I'm told as of a few minutes ago, really by the grace of God, it looks like the injuries are not going to be life-threatening. That could change, obviously. There's still a lot of observation they need to do to make sure that nothing happened internally that could, like this, that could change the outcome over the next day. But it appears at the moment that they're not life-threatening injuries. So that's about all we know so far. But I don't think we have a lot of history with it. We certainly don't have a history with the person that came from out of state, and I don't even think the person who did the shooting we have a lot of history with, if any. So.
Are the names of either of any of these people being released at this point?
Yeah, we're getting the shooting. We'll get that out, but again, we're still trying to make sure that we put out accurate information, not necessarily fast. So, and that's why I say even what I told you so far is subject to change based on what interviews and so forth. So, anything else? All right, thank you all for coming. Appreciate your time, and you all have a great day.
Thank you.